Hello everybody, it's Julia here. Today I'm going to be doing a sort of first impressions of a deck, but also a comparison with some other decks that I've got. These are all archetype cards. Some people might say that they're oracle cards, but I think they're archetype cards essentially. I don't think they're oracle cards in the traditional sense of those kind of cards. These are very different, I think. I've recently bought the Wild Unknown Archetype cards, which I was going to do a separate review for and sort of first impressions, but I thought, why not do a sort of comparison with the two decks that I've already got. So that's what I'm going to do really today. I hope everybody's well. It's a beautiful sunny Sunday here in the UK. It's actually a glorious day. It's cold, but really bright and sunny, and I think that really lifts people's moods, doesn't it? I know it certainly does mine. To see the sun, it's beautiful. So what I've got here today is my Caroline Myss deck of archetype cards, and I've also got her book Sacred Contracts, which goes alongside this deck of cards. You don't need to buy the book to use the cards, but I have, and I will explain why in a minute. And I've also got here the Wisdom Well, which I've not actually seen anybody else on YouTube using, I don't think, as yet. This is by a lady called Ivana Kalinkova. I think this is really quite old. I know I've had it maybe 15 years. Let's have a look at the copyright, 2003. So yeah, this is a book which has a deck of cards within the book. So I think I bought it all those years ago just because I thought it was unusual, but actually it's become one of my favourites for my own spiritual practice. And really, to be honest, I've used archetypes only in the past for my own spiritual practice. I think I've brought them out a couple of times in some of my readings on YouTube, and I have used them with other people face to face in the past, but I find they're so deep, these cards. They resonate on so many levels that I find it hard to do them justice in a kind of generic, general reading for a collective here on YouTube. But I hope that as I'm doing a little sort of review and first impressions and sort of refresher for myself, that might inspire me to use them a little bit more, because I absolutely love these oracle decks actually. So let's start with Caroline Myss, because that's the person that I'm most familiar with, to be honest. This was recommended that I read this, oh, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. The copyright for this book is 2001. It's a fantastic book, really, and it's a companion to this deck of cards. And really what Caroline is encouraging here is that you make your own sacred contract. And in doing that, she's trying to help you identify your own archetypal patterns. She recommends that we all have 4 sort of base archetypes floating around within our kind of psyche that are common to all of us. They kind of represent our base chakra, I guess. That it's our survival instincts, how we operate in the world in terms of our survival instincts. And then she encourages that you go on to choose 8 further archetypes to create your wheel, I guess, your own sacred contract. And I've actually done this myself many years ago, this process, and it took me months actually to go through all the cards and to gradually eliminate various energies and to get down to my final 12 archetypes. It was a fascinating and illuminating journey, to say the least. And I would guess if I did it again now, many of my archetypes would be quite different, because I think that's the nature of these things. But just in case any of you are not really that aware of what archetypes are, actually I'm going to read from this book here, because I think that my spiritual practice grew from the days when I was a mental health nurse and I was introduced to Carl Jung, who I just fell in love with his work, really. And he's obviously a person who first coined the term archetypes. So I shall just read a little bit from this book so that you know what archetypes are and who Carl Jung was, actually. So he was a Swiss psychiatrist, 1875 to 1961. He founded analytical psychology, and he introduced concepts such as synchronicity, the introvert, the extrovert personalities, and the universal archetypal images that he believed derive from the collective unconscious. He was a pioneer in the exploration of the unconscious, and he painfully delved into his own dreams and fantasies in a bid to comprehend the dynamics of the human mind. So he was more than a scientist. Carl used painting and sculpture to explore his dream images. He considered the human psyche in all of its manifestations, including philosophy, myth, art, and religion. He was a mystic. He studied alchemy. He studied his own dreams. For Jung, our life's most important task is the process of individuation, where conscious and unconscious are harmonized and a person gains spiritual completeness. So one of the most important contributions made by Jung to our understanding of the human psyche is the concept of archetypes. Put simply, these are primordial, unlearned aspects of the psyche which are drawn from the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious forms the deepest layer of each individual psyche and comprises the common experience of the race as it is passed down through the generations. So it is the mass mind of humanity, past, present, and future. He described archetypes as systems of readiness for action, and at the same time images and emotions. They are inherited with the brain structure, and indeed they are its psychic aspect. At an individual level, these archetypes are experienced similarly by all people, as tendencies to do and think things in a particular way. From his research into the unconscious as it is expressed in dreams, fantasies, and delusions, Jung concluded that these patterns of thought and behaviour are experienced by everybody as motives such as the shadow, the wise old man, the child, the mother, the maiden. He wrote that the primordial image or archetype is a figure, be it a demon, a human being, or a process that constantly recurs in the course of history and appears wherever creative fantasy is freely expressed. Essentially, therefore, it's a mythological figure. I know there was a chap called Joseph Campbell who wrote a very, very good book about such things called The Hero with 1,000 Faces, and that book is about archetypes. And indeed, the tarot and the major arcana are the archetypes of our soul and our psyche. So that's what archetypes are, essentially. They're things that are common to all of us, no matter our race, our creed, our colour, where we come from in the world. They're kind of universal themes that we all experience, whether consciously or unconsciously. So Caroline Myss, let's have a look what we got in here. She wrote that archetypal patterns awaken in us our own divine potential. They can limit us, they can liberate us from the limitations of our thoughts and feelings. They can help us to shed light on the dark or the little known corners of our souls and amplify our own brilliance and strengths. Archetypes are a source of emotional, physical and spiritual power and can help us to free ourselves from fear. Although sometimes as we first get to know them, a few of them may initially unleash fears within us. Our spiritual challenge with any archetypal fear is to face it and recognise the opportunity it presents to learn its inherent lesson and develop an aspect of personal power. With an archetype that we perceive as difficult or even malevolent, our task is to acknowledge it, overcome whatever weakness it indicates, and work to make its divine potential our own. So the goddess Kali, who I'm sure we're all familiar with, for instance, is the archetype of the energy of destruction. So she has the power of the saboteur archetype, which is present in all of us. This is one of Caroline's core 4 archetypes that's present within us. So what is the other side of destruction if not rebuilding and rebirth? So in symbolic or contract language, the saboteur archetype can trip you up if you do not face its considerable power. But you can also use its energy consciously to dismantle areas of your life that you need to face or fix or heal. There are 2 sides to every archetype, and both can be made to work to your advantage. She says we tend to perceive ourselves and our universe as either good or bad, internal or external, me or you, right or wrong, symbolic or literal, joyful or sad. Our strengths and fears divide our spirit into polarities, into a duality in Eastern terms, which is why faith and doubt wage eternal battles in our psyches. So by identifying and working with our archetypes, we can learn to consolidate the faces of our spirit and bring its power into our daily life to direct our thoughts and actions. These energy guides help us to act mindfully and honourably. They help us to manage our power and live up to our divine potential. So she's put that far better than I ever could there. So I would very much encourage you, if you are interested in the area of archetypes, to buy this book and to use it alongside these oracle cards and have a go at making your own sacred contract, working out your own archetypal patterns. But anyway, let's just have a quick little look at these cards. So as I said, we've got the saboteur here. This is one of the core foundational archetypes that we all have. This sort of highlights your fear of self-empowerment in its light attribute, but in its shadow attribute it can induce self-destructive behaviour or the desire to undermine others. And for me, this is really about the patterns and the habits that we carry with us through life that kind of undermine us and our lives and kind of get in the way of the things that we want to achieve. We have the prostitute, which is also another one of Caroline's core foundational archetypes. In its light attributes, this accentuates the challenge of surviving without negotiating the power of your spirit. And in its shadow attribute, it can place material considerations and security above self-empowerment. And for me, this really just sort of represents what you're willing to do in life to get what you want or to get what you need. You know, we're all prepared to sell ourselves for a price, aren't we, in various ways? Whether, you know, whatever job we do, we are all capable of well, this is about survival, isn't it? This is about what we're prepared to do to survive, to be honest. She also believes that we all have a victim archetype within our psyche. In its light attribute, this prevents you from letting yourself be victimized or victimizing others. But in its shadow attributes, playing the victim for positive feedback in the form of pity and not being able to maintain personal boundaries. So this is something that I'm sure that we all struggle with at different times in our life. And then the other archetype is the child archetype, and Caroline Myss has actually got several different versions of the child. We have the child eternal, the sort of Peter Pan. We have the child divine, which is a kind of innocence and a connection with the divine. We have the child magical, which is somebody who's able to see the beauty and the potential in everything. We have the child orphan, which is somebody who's suffered a core wound, I guess. Somebody who's had to learn to go it alone. Somebody who's had to learn to conquer their fear of surviving. And we also have the child wounded, which I think is common to many of us. I know it certainly is me. In its light attributes, this awakens compassion and the desire to serve others. Wounded children open the learning path of forgiveness. And in its shadow attributes, it blames all dysfunctional relationships on childhood wounds and resists moving forward through forgiveness. So they're very important. And we also actually have the child of nature, which is gorgeous. That's a lovely aspect of the child. This is friendship with animals, communication with nature spirits. It's that kind of thing. And then we have many cards here that you could spend time with, getting to know. In her book, Caroline has a big section on sort of help, really, to help you find your other 8 archetypes. And I think she suggests that you pick out the ones first that resonate with you the most strongly at first. And obviously brilliant if you find all 8 at that time, but if you don't, it's kind of a process of sort of whittling down the other ones by asking pertinent questions. She's got things here like list all the people you feel have a connection to this archetypal pattern. Why did you choose this archetype? Were you aware of having this archetypal pattern prior to reading this material? Where have you met it before? How do you see the shadow of this archetype within you? How does it influence you? What opportunities in your life do you associate with this archetypal pattern? Which opportunities in my life are connected to your energy? In what way do you feel this archetype serves your contracts with people? With whom do you have power plays that you could connect with this archetype? How does this archetype factor into the unfinished business in your life, such as people you haven't forgiven or an aspect of your past you can't let go of? There's energy and intuitive questions, spiritual questions. She gives you some examples of students that she's had and their own journey. She talks about her own journey here. All of the cards in this deck relate to the self. So they're all cards about getting to know you and the various aspects of you so that you can integrate those conscious and unconscious factors within your psyche, leading you to become a more whole and balanced person, I guess. These are lovely cards to pull out as a sort of bigger picture energy for a reading, but I think at their best, these are cards to work with individually. So yeah, there we go. That's those. I have the feeling this is going to be a long video, so you might want to pause the video and make yourself a cup of tea and get yourself comfy. But I hope that you enjoy the video anyway. This is a passion of mine, to be honest, archetypes. It's something that has helped me a great deal in my life, and I feel very grateful to people like Caroline Myss, actually. So the Wisdom Well, I think many of you might not be familiar with this particular deck and this particular book. It's quite quirky, I think. Quite an unusual little deck. And it's very, very much based on Jungian philosophy. So within this deck we have the shadow, we have the persona, we have the anima and the animus, as well as archetypes such as the mother, the father, the child, cards like that. So they're beautiful little cards, actually, really, really nice little cards. They don't have anything written on them, you know, but most of them are self-explanatory, as this one would be the mask, wouldn't it? I say that, I don't know who that one is. So yeah, they're gorgeous little cards, actually. But the book, as usual with a lot of these decks, the book is really what makes it. How it tells you how the cards represent Jung's archetypes, why you might want to work with the archetypes. It talks a little bit about Jung in the modern world. Yeah, there's some affirmations here using the Jungian deck, the meaning of cards, reverse cards, how to do a little spread for yourself. Lovely page here with all of the cards on. And then there's 2 pages devoted to each card, and we start off in this deck with the Psyche. So as I said, this is very much a Jungian based deck. The Psyche is obviously your spirit, isn't it? Your true self, your essence. In the words of Jung, as I see it, the Psyche is a world in which the ego is contained. Maybe there are fishes who believe that they contain the sea. I love Carl Jung. Card number 2 is the Shadow. This is the part of the mind that surfaces into the world. This is like your evil twin, is the way it's described in this book. In the words of Jung, the darkness which clings to every personality is the door into the unconscious and the gateway of dreams. Card number 3 is the Persona. This is kind of your face, your mask for the world, like actors putting on different costumes. We have the Trickster. We have the Mother Moon Goddess, Father Earth, the Demon Queen, who really is a kind of, she's a kind of tower-like energy, isn't she? She's a shadow aspect of the Mother archetype, I guess. The Ogre, who would be a shadow aspect of the Father archetype. We have the Anima and Animus, which is the male and female halves of our character. The opposites, the female qualities in a man are the anima, and the male qualities in a woman are the animus. It's in the words of Jung, whatever an impassioned, almost magical relationship exists between the sexes, it is invariably a question of a projected soul image. We've got the Dark Prince, the Virgin or Whore, Aspiration, the Wise Old Man, the Child Within, the sufferer, which is the victim, isn't it? The patriot, the mandala, because obviously archetypes don't have to be people. They can be places or symbols. And the mandala is a universal symbol, isn't it? He says here, the card refers to the jigsaw pattern of life's circumstances, which may be chaotic or clear. The mandala is the maze. And in the words of Jung, if a mandala may be described as a symbol of the self seen in cross-section, then the tree would represent a profile view of it, the self depicted as a process of growth. There's reversed meanings here as well. We've got the prisoner, the wounded healer. I think that manifests in many of us. Power, the night watchman, which is kind of judgment, really. The hermit, who we're all familiar with, the analyst. The poet, the beggar, the lace maker, the miser, the teacher, the stonemason, the wolfman, the inventor, the hero, the woodcutter, the alchemist. It's fantastic, actually, this deck. It's a very different take on the other two archetype decks that I've got here. Excuse me. But I think it has a great deal to offer, actually, particularly within your own inner work, your own spiritual practice. So yeah, that's the Wisdom Well, and it's by Ivana Kalinkova, published by Barron's, I believe. And as I said, this is very old, and I've not really seen many people using it. If you've got this deck and you use it and you'd like to leave some comments for me, I would love that, actually. And lastly, this deck here, the Wild Unknown Archetypes, which is completely new to me. I haven't got the Wild Unknown Tarot deck either. I may get that, we'll see. But I have to say, if there could be a prize for the box that the cards come in, it would be this deck. It's just beautiful, the whole thing. Accept all, reject none. It's just beautiful. The book that comes with it is beautiful to look at and has so much information within it. And then within this box there is another box, and I think this is what I will keep the cards in, to be honest. Inside the box there's flowers and pearls and all sorts of lovely things. But I think I shall probably keep the cards in this box here, just because it's lovely, isn't it? This is a deck by Kim Kranz. It's HarperCollins publisher. It says on the back, "Welcome to the Wild Unknown Archetypes. From the wellspring of the collective unconscious emerge images that appear in the dreams of every culture, illuminating our multiplicity and uniting us in the endless story of humanity. These are archetypes. Their limitless potential is yours to behold as you travel to the world of dreams, visions and myths. May you always be on this inner quest." These are gorgeous. I've never had a deck actually of cards that are round before. I don't know how I'll get on with shuffling them. Shuffling's not one of my great skills anyway, as many of you may have already seen. We've got some very familiar archetypes here: the mother, the father, the starborn, the eternal child. So different manifestations of the child archetype here: the orphan, the mentor, the poet, the Maiden, the Hunter, oops, the Warrior, the Queen, the King, the Crone, the Judge, the Shapeshifter, the Shaman, the Lovers. I could go on. I mean, they're lovely. I haven't even shuffled this deck, to be honest, and I think probably what's best to show you this deck really is if I pick a card and we'll have a read from the book, because there's so much information in this book. And as I said, this is a completely new deck to me, and I haven't even read the guidebook properly yet. I've kind of flicked through it. So there we go. What have we got here? We've got the Vow. So what I have already noticed about this deck is that the imagery in the cards, while there is information there for my intuition to grasp hold of, I think I will probably need to use the book for some time to really get a lot out of these cards, particularly if I'm reading for myself, if this is part of my own spiritual practice, because I'm not sure that I could get the full amount of information that the author would like. Although obviously everything is on a very individual basis, and we all see different things in cards, we all get different messages from them. I mean, just looking at this card now with the Vow, to me this speaks of commitment, perhaps marriage, a commitment to a cause, committing your heart and mind to something, joining with others or another person to complete something. The kind of thoughts that come into my mind, the images that come into my mind when I look at that. So let's have a look. I have to get used to the numbers on these cards as well. Actually, I do need to, when I've had a little look at this, I shall explain about how she divides the cards up in this deck as well, because it's different to Caroline Myss's deck and the Wisdom Well. So the Vow, and I love this. I love the book. There's just so much information here. Even around the corners, around the edges of the page, there's little bits of writing. So you don't even need to read the whole sort of paragraph here, really. But this is the promise, the oath, the contract. She's put, think of the last promise you made. Was it to yourself or another? Has it been upheld or broken? Anytime the energy of the vow is present, we are in the archetypal realm of ceremony and ritual. That means time stands still and everything is possible. She's put here, when the vow is spoken, the air shifts, karmic ties are formed and destiny tilts on its axis. Our words and intentions have immense power. There is a reason the great mythic stories of our past often include the reciting of oaths and the mixing of drops of blood as a mark of union. The tricky part is that reciting the vow, no matter how casually, activates the external and unseen forces of the world, the ancestors that bear witness. The laws of nature respond. These promises cannot be unsaid or forgotten, so breaking them can leave lingering complexities and loose ends. This card calls us to acknowledge the vow we are living by, consciously or unconsciously, and either recommit to it or create a ritual that signifies its closure. You have been underestimating the power of your promises. So, as I said, there's just a staggering amount of information in this book, and I like that she asks questions. because I think that the real gift of all of these cards, whether they be tarot or oracle cards, is that they make us self-reflect. They should make us ask questions of ourselves and of others and of the world, so that we can grow. In her deck here, she's, well, there's just loads of information. So we've got here, she's written a little bit about what she believes archetypes to be, that they're patterns, that they're universal, that they're timeless, that they're infinite, that they contain both light and dark. That archetypes use image. An archetype may choose any potent channel available to it, whether that be a song, a word, a memory, a poem, a dream, painting, story, nature, or another person. And this is why art is so compelling, because it's built on archetypes. As are many of the stories that we grew up with as children, all the fairy tales, they're all archetypal stories, aren't they, of the hero's journey. Yeah. What she put, she's got here their intentions. What do archetypes want? What do they intend for us? They insist on the imagination. So they move us from the literal to the mythic. And they do this by getting us out of our heads and into the space of dreams, emotions, and imagination. They insist on multiplicity, so they move us from one to the multiple, from the right way to the many ways. They prefer potential over answers, which I think is fascinating. They challenge us to expand our sense of self, to include what we had previously rejected. So archetypes will bring the grotesque and lovable parts of ourselves and our culture to the dinner table so that we can get to know them. Archetypes throw the wildest of dinner parties and everyone is invited. So they insist on the collective. At their core, they tie us back to the collective. So in studying the mother archetype, it's possible for us to look beyond our biography and sense the mother in our culture, in history and in myth. The power in this method is that we build understanding and compassion for the world as we build understanding and compassion for ourselves. It's an infinite win-win. Archetypes want us to grow. What do we have else? So understanding the deck. She's divided this deck up. Cards 1 to 30 are cards of the selves. So these are aspects of ourself. Cards 31 to 50 are the archetypal energies of places. So they're things like streams, cabins, cliffs, caves, all the places that may have stayed with you long after you left it, that represent something to you, something symbolic as well as physical and tangible. Like for me, the cave might represent, in tarot, the card the Hermit, which is something I resonate with quite a lot. The river, a river could represent an actual location or a significant event that happened. Or it's equally likely that the card is just speaking through that landscape to get a certain emotion, perhaps. But it's up to you to discern that. Cards 51 to 70 are the tools. And she's put here, think of the many myths and fairy tales that are centred around a sacred object or tool. The protagonist may lose a glass slipper, be given a sword, need to find a ring or deliver a map, break a spell, send an arrow into the heart of their enemy. So the object represents much beyond itself. Every tool has a time and a place. Discernment is key. And then lastly, cards 71 to 78 are the initiations, and it says they are similar to trump cards or the major arcana in the tarot. They represent the big moments, junctures and situations in life that carry major significance along our journey. In the model of the hero's journey, they may be called the ordeal. So think about falling in love, heartbreak, beyond heartbreak, death of a loved one, marriage, divorce, having a child, experiencing a spiritual awakening that shakes your foundation. We know we have gone through an initiatory experience when the very fibre of life as we know it has changed. We can't go back to the person we were before, but we are not quite sure who the new person or self is. Because of the weight these cards carry, take time to contemplate them deeply. This is what makes them so powerful. They are the keys that unlock the entire deck. So as I said, I don't think this deck is a deck to be used that lightly. Particularly, I think you could spend weeks or months with this deck, trying to unlock some of the archetypes that are floating around within your inner world and your outer world. But as with all of these decks here, with Caroline Myss's deck, with the Wisdom Well deck, I think they could all be used to a degree in reading for other people, but I think where their real power lies, I think where their real benefit lies, is for deep dives for yourself, for soul searching, and for real inner work, for real self-growth and progress. I highly recommend all of them, to be honest, in their own way. I'm going to spend some time with the Kim Cran's deck and try to get to know them a bit better. And I hope to use these archetype cards here on YouTube to do maybe some more specific readings, or perhaps a shadow type reading for certain collectives. I think that would be very interesting and fascinating video to do. But generally, I think these cards, as I said, on the whole, work better for you on a very individual basis for self-reflection and meditation and study. But anyway, I really enjoyed this video today. It's been a long one, I think about 45 minutes. So yeah, thanks for being here with me if you've sat through to the end. As always, if you haven't subscribed, I'd be really grateful if you would. It really helps my channel to grow. It helps with the algorithms. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. And I hope that this video has given you a lot to think about. There's been a lot of information here that I've read out to you. And I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.